On this Friday night, computer chaos. From banks and broadcasters to airports and hospitals, the IT outage slamming systems in Canada and around the world, and the cybersecurity bug behind it. Donald Trump's tirade.
North Korea, Kim Jong-un, I got along very well with him. The press hated when I said that. How could you get along with him?
Reaction to the Republican candidate's record-breaking speech, his first since Saturday's assassination attempt. Lost land returned. Manitoba's plan to reconcile with the Métis community, decades after their village was wiped off the map. Plus, the need for speed. IndyCar kicks into high gear in Canada's largest city. But what happens when race car drivers confront Toronto traffic?
So I actually rented a bike to get here in time.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Millions in Canada and right around the world woke up to computers displaying the so-called blue screen of death. Crucial internet-based services were knocked offline, and the culprit, a flawed software update that caused chaos and confusion. At the heart of the massive disruption is cybersecurity firm Crowdstrike. Its customers include some of the biggest companies in the world, as well as emergency services, small businesses, and government offices. Among those hardest hit were travelers. More than 5,000 flights were canceled globally, with hundreds more delayed. 93 of those cancellations came here in Canada. Crowdstrike says it has identified the problem and is deploying a fix. Eric Sorensen begins our coverage tonight with the chaos in Canada.
One check bag.
On laptops, on iPhones, passengers at airports from Montreal to Vancouver to Toronto were suddenly stuck looking for solutions. Porter Airlines canceled all morning flights. A software bug even prevented updates on screens to show that flights had been delayed. Tyler McClay and family were on their way to a wedding in Halifax, then forced to scramble for an expensive rebooking.
It's unfortunate there was no heads up, there was no notice, there was not really many solutions either.
There were delays at Canada-US border crossings. Transactions at some banks weren't being processed. Even major healthcare systems were affected in Toronto and coast to coast.
Some of our hospital information systems and workstation computers and laptops were going offline.
From Newfoundland and Labrador to British Columbia, health systems had to move quickly.
There was a crack team of IT professionals who worked throughout the night on healthcare IT systems to minimize impact to patients.
The problem started with Crowdstrike.
The Crowdstrike Security Cloud starts with...
The firm provides cybersecurity for companies worldwide, but a faulty software update affected Microsoft computers almost everywhere.
That update had a software bug in it and caused an issue with the Microsoft operating system, and we identified this very quickly and remediated the issue.
How could it happen? Crowdstrike secures businesses from cyber attack. It sent out a software update, but because it had a bug in it, it meant companies and customers with Windows could not restart their computers. Now, Down Detector monitors the online problems with major companies. TELUS reported access issues with its system, and you can see the temporary surge for TD Bank, with users reporting problems early in the day. Some customers saw delays in payment deposits, others couldn't do their banking.
It said it's down the systems, they're sorry for the inconvenience.
Many computer users saw the so-called blue screen of death.
They kept crashing. And as a result, services that rely on them not available. And it is universal because of the sheer popularity of this software. The sheer size and scope is, quite frankly, unprecedented.
This wasn't a cyber attack, but it shows the vulnerabilities of everyday life in our technological world. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Those travel headaches hit passengers right around the world, and while many airlines have now resumed services, that technical glitch is causing continued chaos for other industries, from banking to health services. Crystal Goomansingh looks at the global effort to get businesses back online.
People working with paper. Not too common of a sight in our connected worlds.
It seems that there's a Microsoft issue and all the flights in the U.S. are down. I talked to the Air France lady, and she said that the same problem is happening in Europe.
London, Sydney, Pittsburgh, computers around the world were knocked offline by a bit of bad code Crowdstrike pushed to protect devices running Microsoft Azure and Office 365.
So when you normally have a software bug, the computer is on and connected, and you can issue a command to say, take away this bad software. The computers can't even turn on, so we can't issue the command.
Daniel Teacher says the industry term is bricked. The software bug effectively turned computers into bricks because they can't be updated until someone physically intervenes.
Transportation was one of the main industries that was affected. The fix was issued very early Friday morning, but in places with multiple screens, it can take a lot of time to do the update on every single one of them.
Traveler Matt Jordan was shocked at all the systems that were suddenly rendered inaccessible.
Their rebooking systems were down, their hotel systems were down, their ability to get bags off the plane were down, and even the computer system that the airport uses to open the parking garages was down.
I guess if it hadn't taken the devices offline, this probably would have been a nothing thing. It wouldn't even have probably made the news.
It also stopped the news. In the UK, Sky was knocked offline for a short time, as was the BBC. In the U.S., at least 3 states saw 911 systems affected. The full extent of the cyber outage likely won't be known for a while, as systems are still being brought online. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Some Canadians found their paychecks delayed by the outage, and that problem also extends to Canada's child benefit checks. Eligible parents with children under 18 are set to receive a top-up starting today. The maximum monthly payment is rising to $648.91. That's up nearly 5% over last year. That amount is recalculated annually based on income and inflation. The Canada Revenue Agency says there may now be a slight delay in processing those payments. Canada's Prime Minister is heading off on a summer vacation, but before leaving the nation's capital today, Justin Trudeau had some business to attend to, swearing in a new Labour minister, followed by a meeting of his cabinet. Now, some Liberal MPs, frustrated with Trudeau's plummeting approval ratings, had called for a full caucus meeting before the break to discuss the party's future. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, has been tracking events in Ottawa for us. So, David, what's behind today's mini cabinet shuffle?
Well, Jeff, the Prime Minister needed a new Labour minister after the last one, Seamus O'Regan, said Thursday that he was leaving Cabinet in order to spend more time with his family.
I, Stephen Garrett McKinnon, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare.
Like the departing O'Regan, new Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon is a skilled communicator, and he is ready to defend his government and his leader.
I am here to tell you today that this caucus is foursquare behind our leader. This caucus is foursquare behind the policies that we've adopted and proud of the record that we have.
Maybe so, but several Liberal MPs wanted a caucus meeting nonetheless in the wake of the devastating by-election loss to the Conservatives in a Toronto riding widely seen as a safe seat for the Liberals. But the PM has refused those requests. He did meet Friday with his cabinet, and that was the first cabinet meeting in a month and the first since that by-election loss, but it was a virtual meeting. Trudeau video conferenced from his office. Other ministers dialed in from around the country, where many of them were holding events to try to improve the Liberals' sagging popularity by touting their government's accomplishments on files like the Canada Child Benefit.
The Canada Child Benefit is now 8 years old this summer, and it's going strong.
And that's the sort of thing to expect from Liberal MPs all summer long, talking up national dental care, national pharmacare, $10 a day child care, and hoping that all that boasting boosts their numbers. Jeff.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thanks, David. U.S. President Joe Biden appealed for party unity today as nearly a dozen Democrats joined the growing calls for him to drop out of the presidential race. Biden is now recovering from COVID-19, but has vowed to return to the campaign trail next week, a message that his team is now echoing in his absence.
Donald Trump is not going to offer anything new to the American people. He's the same person he was in 2020. He's the same person he was at the debate stage. He's the same person he is that is about himself and not about the American people. And Joe Biden is more committed than ever to beat Donald Trump.
Those comments come a day after Donald Trump's acceptance speech as the official Republican presidential nominee. Despite promising a new tone to unite Americans, Trump seemed to return to his old political playbook. Jackson Prosco is in Milwaukee with reaction. Jackson.
Jeff, a subdued Donald Trump took to the stage last night, recounting the details of Saturday's shooting for the first time as he accepted his party's nomination.
If I had not moved my head at that very last instant, the assassin's bullet would have perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight. We would not be together.
The images of Trump's bloodied face were splashed across the stage as he spoke of trying to win over all Americans, not just half the country. But that message of unity didn't last long. Trump soon pivoted to unscripted comments full of lies, exaggerations, and mistruths, rehashing false claims that the last election was stolen, attacking immigrants, and praising dictators during his 92-minute speech.
The Democrat Party should immediately stop weaponizing the justice system and labeling their political opponent as an enemy of democracy, except when it comes to cheating on elections and a couple of other things. Then they're fierce. If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done.
The speech went so long that by the time the balloon drop happened, it was after midnight on the East Coast, meaning a large part of the audience may have actually tuned out. Political analysts believe that for Trump to capitalize on goodwill in the wake of the shooting, he would have to stick to message and show he had changed, and that simply didn't happen last night. All of this suggests whoever the Democratic candidate ultimately is, they'll be facing off against the same old Donald Trump they've already come to know. And that may be the first good news Democrats have had in weeks as they grapple with all the uncertainty around President Joe Biden's future. Jeff?
Jackson Prosco in Milwaukee tonight. Thanks, Jackson. A major search is underway right now for a fishing boat from Newfoundland and Labrador that hasn't been heard from since Wednesday night. The Elite Navigator vessel's last known location was about 300 kilometers northeast of Gander. That boat has a crew of 7 people, 5 from the town of New West Valley. The Coast Guard says it has 4 vessels, a helicopter, and 2 planes searching for the missing boat. A fleet of local fishers has also joined the search effort. On the other side of the country, people in Western Canada are sweating through a searing heat wave. Today, Environment Canada issued heat warnings for all of Western Canada with above seasonal temperatures. Daytime highs are expected to climb into the mid to high 30s in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Those hot and dry conditions are fueling wildfires in BC and Alberta. An evacuation order has been expanded for people near Spence's Bridge in BC's interior after the Shetland Creek wildfire ballooned in size, growing to more than 12,000 hectares. Well, in Alberta, a pair of wildfires near Jonvier has that community under alert. One of those fires is burning towards the community and the nearby First Nation and is now threatening the only road in or out. Well, some bad news for people in Ontario hoping to buy booze. A tentative deal between striking Liquor Control Board workers and their employer appears to now be in jeopardy. More than 9,000 workers walked off the job on July 5th. Talks between the two sides resumed on Wednesday, and it seemed a tentative agreement had been reached earlier today. But then hours later, the union alleged that the employer had not signed a return to work protocol, and the employer accused the union of making fresh demands after agreeing to a deal. If an agreement had been reached, LCBO stores were set to reopen on Tuesday. A U.S. journalist sentenced to years in a Russian prison. Coming up, why the conviction is being condemned as a sham. American journalist Evan Gershkovich was sentenced this morning in a Russian court to 16 years in a maximum security penal colony. The Wall Street Journal reporter is the first U.S. journalist arrested on spying charges in Russia since the Cold War. As Mike Armstrong reports, American officials say Gershkovich was never a spy and is now a hostage.
With a conviction rate of about 99%, there wasn't much hope this wouldn't happen. Evan Gershkovich was found guilty of espionage and immediately handed a 16-year sentence. Asked by the judge if he had questions, Gershkovich answered no and was told that's it. the trial is over. The Wall Street Journal issued a statement, quote, "This disgraceful sham conviction comes after Evan has spent 478 days in prison, wrongfully detained, away from his family and friends, prevented from reporting, all for doing his job as a journalist." Now, the prosecutor in the case has claimed Gershkovich was working on orders from the CIA, collecting information about the production and repair of military equipment. The U.S. State Department says the charges have zero credibility. It has classified Gershkovich officially as wrongfully detained. There is another American in Russia with that classification. Canadian-born former Marine Paul Whelan was arrested on spying charges more than 5 years ago. The U.S. Secretary of State said Friday talks with Russia to get both men out are ongoing.
All I can tell you is this. We're working it. We're working it as we speak.
The U.S. accuses Russia of basically stockpiling American hostages for prisoner exchanges.
Evan Gershkovich.
Vladimir Putin himself earlier this year told Tucker Carlson Gershkovich will likely end up being traded. Now, some observers say the early court date and quick trial may be positive signs. The conviction could be a step closer to turning Gershkovich into the bargaining chip the Kremlin wanted to make him. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The UN's top court has found Israel's presence in the Palestinian-occupied territories is unlawful and is calling for it to end. The International Court of Justice found Israel has abused its status as the occupying power in the West Bank and East Jerusalem by carrying out policies of annexing territory, imposing permanent control, and building settlements. It says Israel must end settlement construction immediately. Now, the court's opinion is non-binding, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was dismissing it as false, saying that the Jewish people are not conquerors in their own land. Israel is blaming human error for its failure to stop a deadly drone strike on Tel Aviv early this morning. That cell phone video released by the Israeli military captured the attack. The Iranian-made drone was launched from Yemen. One person was killed and 10 others injured. Yemen's Houthi rebels have launched dozens of drones in the past, but they're usually intercepted. Israel's military says this one was detected, but that its defense forces failed to destroy it. Righting a historical wrong. Still ahead, the land finally returned to Métis in Manitoba. Manitoba's premier is making good on a promise that rights a historical wrong for Métis in that province. Wab Kinew signing over 100 acres of land to the Manitoba Métis Federation.
The goal of what we're trying to accomplish here is to right a historic wrong. What was done to Red River Métis in the past here at St. Madeleine was wrong and should never have taken place.
The village of St. Madeleine, 3 hours west of Winnipeg, was burned to the ground by government workers back in 1938. Melissa Ridgen reports on the land's return.
This has been a place for cattle to graze for the past 80 years. But before that, it was a thriving Métis village called St. Madeleine, home to 35 families, a church, and a school. All that remains now is a cemetery. The government torched the village so area farmers would have space for their cattle.
I don't think many Manitobans or even Canadians know of this story, where cattle were more precious than human beings, and meaning the Métis people.
Fresh off an election win last fall, Premier Wab Kinew assured this would be made right.
There are many specific priorities of the Métis people and the Métis Nation. And one of them is St. Madeleine. And so I want to signal to you that I know that this is an important priority, that there is a history there that must be addressed.
With the stroke of a pen, it was. 100 acres returned to the Métis. The cows will now need to graze elsewhere.
Everybody's related here.
Verna de Montney was just a child when St. Madeleine families returned from work in the fall of 1938 to find their village gone, their dogs shot. Descendants return to the former town site on this weekend, every July, to remember what was lost and dream that someday St. Madeleine would be returned to them.
Do you ever think about getting this land back? Oh yeah, constantly. If it's in my lifetime, I want a house over there.
More realistically, she believed her return here would be to the cemetery. With the land back, Métis President David Chartrand says it will be very much for the living.
Families that have lost and burnt their houses to ashes are talking about coming to build some form of a smaller house, a smaller cabin, just for keeping the memory alive.
And a spot for future generations of St. Madeleine. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Start your engines. Toronto gears up for the Honda Indy, but its drivers were no match for the city's gridlock. Welcome back. Speed demons in Toronto are gearing up for a thrilling weekend of racing at the Honda Indy. Race car drivers from around the world will compete in multiple races this weekend. But ahead of the event, at least one driver had to compete with Toronto's infamous traffic jams.
I got stuck in traffic as well, so actually rented a bike to get here in time and then ran the rest of the way.
That's Australian driver Lockie Hughes, who nearly missed that press conference due to the gridlock. Toronto was recently ranked the world's 17th most congested city. That study also says Toronto drivers wasted about 63 hours on the road last year. This weekend's racing event downtown is causing even more road closures and congestions until Sunday night. So whoever wins, it won't be Toronto's commuters. And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Rose, Blanche, Harbour, Lacou, Newfoundland, and Labrador. We love to see your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.